2025 did not arrive for Libra with a gentle knock at the door. It came like a quiet morning, so quiet that it made you stop, look at yourself in the mirror, and ask an honest question for the first time. When did I get so used to living that I forgot myself? For a long time, you learned to smile instead of pushing back. You learned to stay silent instead of asking to be heard. You learned to give in so often that it slowly became part of who you are. You believed that if you were soft enough, understanding enough, forgiving enough, everything would eventually work itself out. You believed that keeping the peace was the same as being in balance. But this year, through very real, very human collisions, 2025 forced you to see something you had been avoiding for a long time. There is no balance that can be built on the slow erosion of yourself. There were moments this past year when you felt tired, but could not name why. Not because you were weak, but because you had been carrying too much that was never yours to hold. You listen deeply. You understand easily. Yet you rarely allow yourself to be the one who needs comfort. You became a safe place for others for so long that you forgot you also need somewhere to rest. And then 2025 placed you in situations where sacrifice was no longer recognized, where patience no longer brought peace, where silence stopped making things better, not to punish you, but to wake you up. This year taught Libra a lesson that was hard but necessary. Kindness without boundaries eventually turns into self-harm. You began to notice the moments when you said yes, while your heart was quietly calling for help. The times you stayed only because you did not want to disappoint anyone, even though deep inside you were already exhausted. And in those moments, 2025 gently but firmly pulled you back. It placed you face to face with a truth you could no longer avoid. You were not born to always be the one who loses out. True harmony does not require you to disappear. There may have been times this year when you felt lonely even while surrounded by familiar faces. Times you wondered why giving so much still left you feeling empty. 2025 did not answer you with words. It answered you with experience. It showed you what it feels like when you no longer have the energy to keep everyone happy. And in that exhaustion, something new quietly began to grow. The seed of self-respect. The seed of a question you had never dared to ask before. If I stop giving so much, will I still be loved? As Libra slowed down, as you began to feel your own breath again, you started to understand something important. Returning to yourself is not selfish. It is healing. It is the moment you place a hand on your chest and admit that you also need care, protection, and respect. And in that fragile pause, where you stop trying to please the world, another feeling appears. Lighter, more honest. Like early morning light slipping through a narrow window. Not blinding, but just enough to let you know the long night is almost over. And from that pause, your story does not end. It simply shifts into a new rhythm. Deeper, brighter. A rhythm where what you are about to realize will not only change how you treat others, but completely transform the way you walk forward, carrying a new truth resting quietly in your heart, waiting to be revealed. And as Libra begins to reconnect with their own breath, as you stop forcing yourself to hold everything together, something else slowly comes into focus, clear and undeniable. It is the way you begin to look back at the people who passed through your life this past year, the faces that once made your heart stir, the connections that felt strangely familiar, as if you had known each other for a lifetime. There were bonds you truly believed were destiny. You thought that, with enough patience, enough love, enough sacrifice, everything would naturally find its place. But 2025 would not allow you to keep living inside that uncertainty. This year placed you inside relationships that made you stop and ask why you felt so exhausted being close to someone who once mattered so deeply. There were moments you began to doubt yourself, your feelings, your worth, simply because you were trying to hold on to a connection that was slowly making you smaller. And this is how 2025 began speaking to you, not through clear explanations, but through a quiet emptiness that appeared even when you were not technically alone. You started to realize that some people enter your life not to stay, but to activate a deeper lesson within you. They arrive to test your boundaries, to see how much you are willing to sacrifice, before you finally turn back and protect yourself. There are relationships that require you to constantly reshape yourself to fit them. Moments where you keep telling yourself just a little more effort, just a little more patience, and everything will be fine. But 2025 gently pulls the curtain down, revealing a truth that cannot be ignored. Real love, real connection, does not ask you to trade away your self-respect. There may have been times this year when you blamed yourself for a relationship that went nowhere. Times you thought, if only I had been a little different, a little more understanding, a little more patient, things would have turned out better. But this year offers you a deeply human lesson. Not every ending is a failure. Some endings exist only to protect you from staying in places that no longer match the person you are becoming. As Libra looks back, you begin to see that every relationship in 2025 left its own distinct mark. Some taught you how to give without conditions. Some taught you why boundaries are necessary. Some showed you how prolonged silence can slowly erode a gentle heart. And there were also those who left, yet became the reason you finally understood that you deserve a softer kind of connection, one built on respect, one that does not require you to perform or struggle just to be loved. You begin to understand that someone leaving your life does not mean you are lacking. Sometimes, it simply means you have outgrown the space that relationship could hold. And in that understanding, Libra starts to feel lighter, no longer clinging out of fear of loss, no longer holding on to the idea of destiny as a vague promise. You begin to trust that what is truly meant for you will never ask you to sacrifice your peace. From the relationships that came and went, a new awareness quietly forms, that choosing who is allowed to stay in your life matters just as much as how deeply you love them. And as that awareness begins to take root, you do not rush to act. You simply listen. You listen more closely to your emotions. You listen to the subtle signals rising from within, as if something is preparing to be spoken, another truth waiting for you to be brave enough to face it. And the story continues to carry you forward, deeper, toward a place where silence is no longer an option. Libra was never born to argue. You are used to listening before responding, to searching for common ground before defending your own point of view. For many years, you believed silence was a form of maturity, that giving in was a sign of refinement, that if you did not speak up, things would naturally settle on their own. But 2025 arrived and revealed a truth you could no longer deny. There are moments when silence is no longer wise, but a quiet way of removing yourself from your own life. Over the past year, there were likely many times you wanted to say something, but stopped at the edge of the thought. You weighed other people's feelings. You considered the overall atmosphere. You asked yourself whether speaking up might make things more uncomfortable, and so you chose silence, as you always had. But 2025 began to show you the cost of that choice. Not all at once, not through a dramatic event, but through a slow, daily exhaustion. Through the heaviness of realizing you were becoming accustomed to swallowing your own emotions. There were moments when you felt present, yet not truly seen. You were there, but your voice did not count. You contributed, but your needs were overlooked. And deep inside, a question began to rise, clearer each time. If I keep staying silent like this, will there come a day when I no longer recognize myself? 2025 did not answer that question with advice. It answered by placing you into situations where you could clearly feel your own disappearance each time you did not speak. This year taught Libra something essential. Peace cannot be built on prolonged suppression. A calm surface does not mean everything inside is okay. There are relationships that appear peaceful, but are held together by one-sided endurance. And 2025 began to shake those structures. Not to destroy you, but to show you that you cannot keep paying with your inner peace just to make things look fine. There may have been moments this year when you spoke up for the first time, your voice trembling, your heart racing. And afterward, you may have felt guilty, as if you had done something wrong. But then, something important became clear. You were still here. The world did not collapse. The people who truly respect you did not leave just because you told the truth. And through that experience, you began to understand that speaking up for yourself is not an act of conflict. It is an act of self-protection. In 2025, Libra learned a deeply human lesson about presence. You have the right to exist fully in your relationships, not only as the peacemaker, not only as the bridge, not only as the understanding one. You are allowed to have emotions, to have opinions, to have boundaries. And each time you speak even the smallest truth about what you need, you slowly return to yourself. This is not a loud transformation. It is quiet, but steady, like early morning light gradually filling a room. As Libra begins to allow their voice to be heard, you also begin to hear your inner voice more clearly. You can tell the difference between true peace and silence paid for with exhaustion. And in the space after the words have been spoken, a new feeling appears, lighter, more honest. As if you have finally set down a weight you carried for far too long. And from that relief, another value quietly takes shape, clear, steady, preparing to guide you into a deeper understanding of yourself, where you begin to look not only at how you feel, but at what you truly deserve from this life. And as Libra begins to hear their own voice more clearly, as you dare to speak about what you need without the trembling you once felt, another layer of truth slowly comes into view. Quiet, but profound. It is the truth about how you have treated your own value for a very long time. 2025 did not point this out loudly. It did not confront you directly. It simply placed you in situations so familiar that you could no longer avoid seeing them. You do a great deal. You have been trying for a long time. You carry a rare sense of dedication and responsibility within you. And yet, the feeling of being recognized, fairly compensated, and genuinely valued has often been missing. There may have been moments when you told yourself that money is not everything, that as long as you are useful, as long as everyone else is okay, it is fine if you come up short. Libra naturally sees spiritual value first. But 2025 forced you to face a very practical truth. When giving is no longer balanced, it stops being noble. It becomes depletion. And when you consistently receive less than what you put in, it is not only your finances that are affected. Your self-respect quietly erodes as well. This year, you may have found yourself in situations where your efforts were taken for granted. You were trusted, but not compensated fairly. You were relied upon, yet when you needed support in return, you were passed over. And the most painful part was never the number in your account. It was the feeling that your worth had never been properly acknowledged. 2025 does not blame you for this. It simply places a gentle question before you. One you may never have truly answered before. Why have you been so willing to accept less than your true value? Libra begins to realize that undervaluing yourself does not happen overnight. It is the result of a habit of putting others first, of believing that asking for what you deserve might disrupt harmony. But this year teaches you something essential. True harmony does not exclude fairness. Money does not make you less refined when you care about it. On the contrary, it is a very clear measure of whether you are being treated justly. Over the past year, you may have started to feel uneasy continuing to give without limits. You may have wondered whether asking for what you deserve makes you selfish. And in that hesitation, 2025 offers you experience, not theory. It shows you that self-respect does not stand in opposition to kindness. You can be generous and still know your worth. You can give from abundance rather than from lack. Slowly, Libra learns to see money as a form of balanced exchange, no longer something to avoid or diminish. You begin to notice that when you honor your own effort, the world starts to reflect that back to you, not immediately, not through dramatic change, but through a steadier feeling when you speak about your value, through clearer boundaries, through the moment you stop apologizing for asking to be compensated fairly. And in the moment you stop diminishing yourself, something else happens, very quietly. You feel yourself standing taller, lighter, as if, for the first time, you are building a new foundation. One where balance does not exist only in emotion, but also in how you exchange energy with life itself. And from that foundation, another movement begins to form, deeper, more demanding. One that asks not only that you know your worth, but that you are brave enough to release what no longer reflects the person you are becoming. And then, as Libra begins to stand more firmly in the awareness of your own worth, as you no longer avoid naming what you truly deserve, another challenge quietly appears, silent but heavy. It is the question of letting go, not letting go because you are weak, not letting go because you have no choice, but letting go because you have gone far enough to understand that there are things which, if you continue to hold on to them, will slowly cause you to lose yourself. 2025 does not force you to leave. It does not push you out the door. It simply places you in very still moments where you can clearly see how tired you become each time you try to hold on to something that no longer belongs to you. There may have been times when you clung tightly to a relationship out of fear that leaving would cause everything to fall apart. There may have been roles you kept because they felt familiar, because they felt safe, even though deep inside, you no longer saw yourself there. Libra does not like disruption. You value stability. You love the feeling that everything is in its proper place. But 2025 reveals a truth that is gentle, yet profound. Some things look stable on the surface, but are quietly restricting your growth. And staying only to preserve outer balance can slowly throw your inner world further out of alignment. Letting go does not come to you in a dramatic moment. It arrives in the sighs that grow heavier when you think about a person, a job, an old belief. It shows up in the weight you feel each time you ask yourself why you are still trying when your heart is no longer in agreement. 2025 does not call this failure. It calls it honesty. Honesty with your feelings. Honesty with your limits. Honesty with the person you are becoming. When Libra dares to release, even if only in thought, something very different happens. Not the emptiness you once feared, but the opening of new space. Like opening a window after spending too long in a closed room. The air flows in gently, yet clearly enough for you to realize how accustomed you had become to living in tightness. You begin to see more clearly who truly remains when you stop forcing everything to stay intact. You start to distinguish what is held together by love and what exists only because of habit and fear. There may have been moments when you felt guilty for letting go, moments when you wondered if choosing to leave or choosing not to carry on as before made you selfish. But this year teaches you a deeply human lesson. Releasing what no longer fits is not turning your back on someone. It is turning back toward yourself. And when you're brave enough to stop betraying your own true feelings, you create something essential for the life ahead, a precedent of self-respect. Letting go also allows Libra to see more clearly the value of what remains. Relationships that do not require you to struggle to be understood. Roles that allow you to expand rather than shrink. New beliefs that feel lighter, more open, and no longer place you in a position of constant sacrifice. 2025 shows you that discernment does not make you less loving. It allows your love to land where it truly belongs. And in the quiet after release, another truth slowly emerges. Calm, yet unmistakably clear. When you stop holding on to so much, you finally make room to receive. When you no longer cling to the past out of fear of losing balance, you create a new balance, one that is more honest, more real. As if life itself is preparing to place a new question into your hands, a deeper question, a more grounded one, about how you will build stability from here on, now that you are no longer gripping the very things that once made you tired. And when Libra finally dares to release what no longer fits, when your hands loosen their grip on the things that once exhausted you, a very unfamiliar feeling appears. Not loss, as you once feared, but a gentle emptiness. Like a breeze moving through a room that has just been cleared. And inside that open space, you begin to realize something important. 2025 did not only take away a few relationships, a few roles, a few old beliefs. It was closing an entire version of you, a version that lived for a very long time, by making everyone else comfortable, except yourself. You may not have noticed this at first. The change did not arrive with a clear announcement. It came through subtle shifts. You no longer react the way you used to. The things that once made you anxious, that once pushed you to apologize too quickly, that once convinced you to reshape yourself to fit, no longer hold the same power over you. You begin to be silent in a different way. Not silent to endure, but silent to observe. You begin to say no without excessive explanation. You begin to step away from conversations that make you shrink. And in each of these small changes, a long cycle is quietly coming to an end. The old version of Libra believed that your value lived in being agreeable. You thought that if you were gentle enough, understanding enough, self-sacrificing enough, everything would always be okay. But 2025 shows you a truth that cannot be undone. Pleasing everyone does not make you more loved. It slowly erases your boundaries and your sense of self. And at some point, when you are no longer playing the role of the peacemaker, you no longer recognize who you are. This year does not end with loud destruction. It ends with a deep settling. You look back and see how many times you held your feelings in, how many times you convinced yourself that taking the short end was acceptable, and you understand something clearly. If you continue living this way, you will not have the energy to become the person you are being called to become. The ending of this old version is not a punishment. It is a necessary pause. You may have noticed that you appear different to others now. Less predictable, less accommodating, less willing to carry what is not yours. And perhaps that discomforted some people. But 2025 teaches you a very direct lesson. True maturity is not being liked by everyone. It is no longer betraying yourself just to maintain the image of harmony. As the old version slowly fades, you do not become cold or closed off. You become more real. You give when you want to, not when you are afraid to lose. You stay where you are respected, not where you are hesitant to leave. You begin to live by a different rhythm, slower but steadier, less compromising, yet richer in self-respect. This is not an easy change, but it is an unavoidable one. And in the moment, you accept that you are no longer the Libra of previous years. A deep sense of calm arrives, as if you have quietly closed a door that had been open for far too long, not to abandon the past, but to protect the person you are becoming. And from that quiet ending, something new begins to take shape. Not rushed, not loud, but strong enough to guide you forward, carrying everything you have learned and preparing you for another shift waiting just ahead. And then, as the old year slowly fades behind you, as the version of Libra who lived to please everyone quietly comes to a close, you step into 2026 in a very different state. Not loud, not dramatic, but unmistakably clear. You are no longer naive in the old way, not because you have lost your gentleness, but because you have faced the truth too many times to keep deceiving yourself. What 2025 forced you to confront is no longer a wound. It has become lived knowledge, resting steadily within you. Entering 2026, Libra no longer asks who you are in the eyes of others. You begin to know what you need to feel at peace. You recognize what allows your heart to open and what causes it to tighten. You stop over-explaining your choices because you have become your own clearest answer. That certainty does not come from always being right. It comes from accepting the truth about yourself, your strengths, and your limits. Something subtle happens when you step into the new year holding truth in your hands. You no longer react as quickly as before. You listen more, not to comply, but to discern. You can sense early on whether something fits you or not, instead of staying long enough to prove how much you can endure. And that small shift creates a profound difference. You begin to live more lightly, not because life offers fewer challenges, but because you no longer carry burdens that were never yours. 2026 opens like a road no longer covered in thick fog, not because everything is certain, but because you are strong enough to walk into the unknown without fear. You understand that you do not need to accept everything to keep the peace. You do not need to remain in places that make you smaller just to be recognized. You move forward with a new compass, one shaped by the very real lessons of the year before. And that compass does more than point the way. It also reminds you when to stop. Libra in 2026 no longer searches for balance outside. You build it from within, from knowing when to say yes and when to say no, from giving when you are full, not when you are depleted, from allowing yourself to receive without guilt. And within that new balance, life begins to respond differently. Opportunities arrive with better timing. Relationships become quieter, yet deeper. Choices require less explanation, yet offer lasting peace. You may come to realize that 2026 does not look like a miracle. It does not erase the past. It does not promise a perfectly smooth road, but it gives you something far more valuable, the feeling that you are living in alignment, that what you build from here is not rooted in the fear of abandonment, but in self-respect. And from that foundation, everything begins to shift naturally, as if life itself has finally agreed to move at your pace. As Libra continues forward this year, you do not rush to name the destination. You simply know you are moving in the right direction. And within that quiet certainty, another feeling slowly takes shape, deeper, more enduring. The sense that after everything you have faced, released, and closed, you are approaching a way of living where you not only understand who you are, but are finally ready to receive what life wishes to offer you, fully and without doubt. And then, as you take your first steps into 2026, there are no fireworks lighting up the sky, no grand promises hanging in the air to reassure you. The new year arrives quietly, and yet, within that quiet, Libra senses something very different, a feeling of rightness. Not right by someone else's standards, but right by the rhythm of your own heart. 2026 does not try to convince you that everything from here on will be easy. It simply shows you softly that you are now strong enough to keep moving forward without betraying yourself anymore. What you carry into this year is not vague hope, but truth, shaped and refined by experience. You have faced what hurt you. You have accepted that some things cannot be saved by sacrificing yourself further. You have released what once required you to shrink just to fit the situation. And because of that, 2026 does not need to be a miracle. It is a result. The result of a year in which you dared to live honestly, even when it was difficult. Libra enters the new year with a very different kind of balance. Not one maintained by pleasing everyone, but one built from the inside out. You no longer over-explain your choices. You no longer apologize simply because you need space. You understand that some people may not stay when you begin living more truthfully, and that no longer frightens you, because you have learned that peace does not come from holding on to everything, but from choosing what is right. 2026 may still bring challenges. There will be days when uncertainty appears, decisions that require you to pause, to reflect, and to listen very carefully to the voice within. But unlike before, you no longer walk through these moments alone with yourself. You have become someone who stands on your own side. And that is the greatest shift of all. When you stop resisting your emotions, when you allow yourself to be fully who you are, life begins to respond in a surprisingly natural way. You may notice that what comes to you this year is not loud, not flashy, but lasting. Relationships with less drama and more genuine respect. Opportunities that do not demand you trade away your peace, but allow you to grow at your own rhythm. Money, energy, recognition begin to flow more steadily because you have learned to honor your value at its root. 2026 offers you something simple, yet rare. The knowing that you do not need to become the most agreeable version of yourself to be accepted, that you do not need silence to keep the peace, that you can be gentle and grounded, giving yet discerning. And within that true balance, you no longer feel as though you are chasing life. You move with it, slowly, intentionally, with trust in yourself. As this story comes to a close, there is no sharp ending. Only the sense that you have stepped to the side of the road, looking back on the journey with understanding rather than blame. 2025 has fulfilled its purpose. 2026 has nothing left to prove. It simply opens, quietly, like a door that is no longer locked, inviting you into a life where peace is no longer something you must trade for, but something you are worthy of living with every single day.